Hello and welcome to another episode of the Tejano Traveler. I'm your host Wally, and today we are taking in part 4 of El Camino Real de los Tejas trail. We have reached East Texas and we have entered the Piney Woods, which was a really shaded area due to all the pine trees that used to be there. And one of our first stops is Mission Tejas State Park. This is a reproduction of a mission of what they thought it looked like. It is close to where the actual Camino route is located. People aren't really sure where this mission was located, but this is as good as any other place, I guess. So they have this replica mission here that you can go and check out. Of course, it's made out of timbers because that's what the supplies were around. That's what was around. So if you come here, you can get to see some of this woodwork that they would have used back then and everything. This mission was constructed in order to keep all the French out, and then that's when they realized, hey, we need to have a route that goes from Mexico City all the way to Louisiana so that the French can stay out and so that they could know that we are here. So the route passed right by here. There's an actual sign that lets you know that you're walking the same trail as people hundreds of years ago. So it's kind of neat knowing that, and when you come here, you walk along a historic route and you realize that people were here and that they probably pulled to the side and took a pee. So that's what I did while I was here, just to sort of be in, the same mind frame as all those travelers back then. Yep, that's a good place to do it. Anyways, all these rivers would needed to be crossed, such as the Neches River. You either waited till the water was low or you found a place. And here's a historic markers that I keep telling you about. They're all over the place on this route. And another place where they would pass by as a marker was the Caddo Mounds. This is at Caddo Mounds State Historic Site. This is a recreation of the Caddoan houses. They're big, they're beautiful. I love looking at them. I love being inside of them. But there were these mounds that the Caddo people would make. And while this place wasn't populated by the time the Camino started, they were still there, so it was a marker, and that's how you knew you were on the right route. That's how you knew that you were making progress. That's how you knew you were heading the right way. That you would see these mounds. And even back then, they knew that these were man-made. They knew they were important to the Native Americans, so they pretty much left them there and just used them as markers. But if you come to this state historic site, you could visit the visitor center and get to learn a little bit more about the Caddoan people, because in the Piney Woods, the Caddos were pretty helpful with the Spanish, which is where we get the word Tejas from, and which is why we dedicated a mission to them. Tejas means friends. They were friendly. And this is the other river they would have to cross, two of the major rivers. This is the Angelina River, which is a little bit easier to cross than the Neches. Now, along this route, you can stop by the Douglas Pavilion. It's full of historic markers. It's full of maps. It's really informative to stop here. I got my bearings here, decided where I wanted to go, what I wanted to follow. So it's pretty cool that they have it here. And I loved reading each of these markers. And I learned a lot. This place here is heavy with the history of El Camino. It's heavy with Texas history. It's heavy with Spanish history. It's heavy with French history. So it's all a really strong historic area. And I'm glad that Douglas, Texas decided to do something to commemorate all this. So you go, Douglas, Texas. Got not much going for you other than that. But Nacogdoches was a major stop in the east. You had San Antonio in the center, and then Nacogdoches was your next major stop. And if you come here, you can go visit the old stone fort so you can find out a bit more of the history of El Camino and the history of Nacogdoches. If you come here, you can see some of the Caddoan artifacts. Just like I said, the Caddos were very important to this area of Texas and important to El Camino because they were not hostile like some of the other tribes that you see, like the Karankawas and some of those other ones who pretty much hated the Spanish and the French, with a reason. But here's a map where we started. We've gone through San Antonio, New Braunfels, Bastrop, Austin, Bryan, Crockett, Alto, Nacogdoches. And this stone fort has been there for a long time. It's half reproduction and half old stones from the actual place. But it's been a place for people for thousands of years. And also, sad history. This is the last Caddoan mound in the area. Look how small that is. But it's a Caddoan mound, and I decided to climb it because I've been wanting to climb one. Then I realized these are sacred spots, so I should probably not climb them. I'm sorry. But houses were important along this route, and one of them was the Stern Hoya House. It welcomed people. It was a place for people to stay. Sam Houston stayed here. Other famous people would have stayed here. So it's part of the history of Nacogdoches. When you come here, definitely go check it out. Get to learn a little bit about Sam Houston, about the families that lived there, and about old pioneer Nacogdoches times. Also important is the Durst Taylor home, which is an example of the type of homes that the Anglos would start to build as they were traveling the route, heading closer and closer to San Antonio and all the shenanigans that happened there. But if you come here, you can get to see what life was like back then, and then you also have the marker, because right in front of it is where El Camino used to pass through. And then further along that same road, maybe a mile or so, you get to find the Misión Nuestra Señora de Guadalupe in front of an AutoZone. But that's where it used to be before it moved to New Braunfels. And here are some of the old routes. Highway 21 is a major one that pretty much follows the old historic El Camino de los Tejas route, and it leads you straight to Mission Dolores State Historic Site, which preserves some of the history of Mission Dolores, which was the last major mission right before you cross over into Louisiana. This is what it looked like. We can see the maps. We can see some of the artifacts. Now I'm excited because they're supposed to build a replica of the mission, so I love missions and I love replicas, so I am waiting with bated breath. That's what it's supposed to look like eventually. So hopefully they'll get their money together and we get to find out a lot more about Texas, and it'll be kind of cool to see what the actual mission looked like. But if you come here, they got a small park, and of course they got their markers here to celebrate El Camino and the mission, and I love seeing these old granite markers all over the place. You see them, I've probably seen like 20 at least, if I remember correctly. But then something really cool that I really enjoyed were the swales, the Loanillo swales. A swale is a ditch that is formed from walking through it and on it over several years. And that's where we are on the map, almost into Louisiana. But these swales, you sort of walk, all the walking back and forth between the people and the cattle and the animals and the horses and the carriages. They create these depressions in the ground, and you can still see them, and they're part of history. You can sort of see it there. People would walk through them, and eventually they become well-known markers for El Camino or for other trails. And it's kind of cool to see how they are preserved in some areas. Of course, some areas have completely wiped them out, but if you come here, you can see how deep it actually gets in some of these areas, which is kind of awesome. This is definitely something I learned while on this trip, so I was glad to find a place where I could actually see examples of it. And then we have some more markers. I think that was the last marker I saw in Texas. And then we have the Gaines Oliphant House, which used to be a place where people would stop because they would help ferry you over the Sabine River. Of course, the Sabine River is now the Toledo Bend Reservoir. So it'd be a lot harder to cross than it was back then. But that leads you into Spanish Louisiana, which is our next video. Anyways, thanks for watching. I hope you've been enjoying these videos, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you. Bye-bye.